that is a little thing that's been going on, and that is Evo Fighting Championships 2014. And if you don't know what Evo is, it is probably the biggest fighting championship tournament. We talked about this a little earlier. There are a couple other ones out there, but Evo is definitely, that's the big one. That's the granddaddy of them all.
That's the world's. That's like the world championship. That is. It's all players come from all around the world to that tournament. That's where the best are, and they bring their best, and you can make it, even partially up the ladder at Evo. You're an amazing player. So
yeah. And this
a
year,
lot of fighting games,
over 100,000 people watched it live on Twitch, which is a pretty big amount. And then that's just the people who watched it live. I can only imagine the people who just caught a couple of the matches afterwards, like I did. I just was like, okay, I'm gonna look at that championship, and that's kind of how I watched it. But it was pretty cool to see it over the weekend going on. Different channels like IGN put up a lot of them. Of course,
was that 100,000? Was that 100,000 for the whole thing, or for like one match?
It said
like
more than 100
championship match.
More than 100,000. I think it was over the whole weekend, so it's still a pretty good number for the whole weekend, though. And prize money was up to $111,000 was given away for the different tournaments this year. And let's run over a couple of the games. The biggest game there was actually Ultra Street Fighter 4, but then you had other games like Killer Instinct, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom, Injustice, Super Smash Bros. Melee, King of Fighters 8, Blaze Blue, which was actually very surprising to me because that was like the least known of all these fighting games in my opinion, and it had the highest payout for prize money. So.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe they're trying to get more people into that, because I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And I know that fighting game series myself, but it is a little shaky in the fighting game community from what I know. So.
Yeah, and then the last big one was Tekken Tag 2, and I think the noticeable leave out was like Soul Calibur game and Dead or Alive, which is huge on the fighting game circuit. So that kind of threw me off.
Yeah, I've heard Soul Calibur really is not considered that serious of a fighting game. Like, I like the series, and I've heard some people say like it's kind of questionable why that one gets its place. But one of the things to know about fighting games in the fighting game community, there's kind of a distinction between what are considered the serious competition fighting games and what they call like the anime games, which are a certain style and certain companies do them. Blaze Blue would typically fall under that category and not be as major in the fighting game tournaments, at least in the U.S. Maybe it's different in other parts of the world, which is why it's at Evo and had such a big payout. I'm not sure. But in a lot of the U.S., they don't really gravitate towards the anime ones. They're not seen as being very good competition. They get a lot of kind of slack or slights for whatever it is. But so you wouldn't see, and for some reason, I think Soul Calibur is considered part of that group.
Well, I figured Soul Calibur because they have more weapons than some of these other ones, but then I look at games like Mortal Kombat is usually one of the ones involved, and a lot of people are like, well, why isn't Mortal Kombat in this year? Well, that's because they replaced it with Injustice, Gods Among Us, which is made by the same people, which is pretty much run on the same engine, so it's
that's the other thing.
Same game.
That's the other thing to remember, too. The companies that make these games also have to allow it in the tournament, I think. Because I remember there was some controversy about Nintendo previously not allowing Smash Brothers or Smash Brothers. First, they didn't want it at all in the competitions, and then they didn't want it to be exclusively Melee because they had moved on to Brawl, right? Yeah. But they slackened up on that.
They do stick with Melee because that was the one that was in there. And who knows? I mean, maybe if you put out another one like whatever this new one is going to be, maybe that'll show up. But I just think it's cool that video games is becoming more of an esports genre, and a lot of people don't believe in esports. I'm a little bit skeptical from time to time, but it is a competitive force. And so what is sports in general? It's just some sort of competition between either individuals or teams, and that's really what you have here. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical to be a sport, but it is a sport. I mean, like golf isn't really physical. Yeah, it's more physical than video games, don't get me wrong, but it's not as physical of a sport. Bowling, that's considered a sport, again, not as physical. But I kind of think it's cool because you also have the rise of the MLG gaming. Their championships was, a couple months ago, and that came out to pretty big numbers too. So it seems like we're kind of seeing a rise in the whole video games as an industry. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction right here. In the next 15 to 20 years, we're going to be like South Korea, because South Korea, I want to say the biggest sport in South Korea is StarCraft, isn't it?
It definitely is.
You know?
It just hands down is.
That is their sport.
They have major sponsors for that. It's like the sports teams here, like other sport, like I don't know, basketball teams.
If you're good at StarCraft and you move to South Korea, you can make a pretty darn good living doing that, and people would actually know you walking down the streets, which is kind of weird to say, but
yeah, but it's like the best players in the U.S. have gone to just train with some of the South Korean teams before, and they just get blown away like all the time. Just regular practice, whatever, can't do it. Like it is just so big there. It's like. I don't even know what to compare it to. I guess it'd be like going from a European player of football coming to the U.S. play the NFL. Like that's the level.
Yeah, they would get crushed.
And I don't even mean the European League player. Like you're just like a club level whatever player.
Or like a Canadian football player. But my prediction is that in the next 15 to 20 years, that will replace some of the lower sports like tennis and golf as being more viewed. You're going to start, because the MLG gaming actually was broadcast on ABC, and the X Games is starting to put some of the MLG gaming in there. Not anytime immediately, but it will keep growing in my opinion, and it'll become more of a thing to watch, especially as video games get a little more immersive. People want to see that more. So.